Another day, another story. With sabers drawn, about 600 Italian cavalrymen yelled out their traditional battle cry of Savoia and galloped headlong toward 2,000 Soviet foot soldiers armed with machine guns and mortars. On August 23, 1942, some sources say August 24, the cavalrymen, part of the Axis invasion of the Soviet Union during World War II, were attempting to close a gap that had opened up between the Italian and German armies along the Don River. It was to be the end of an era. Welcome to Tabo Eminent Channel. Though experts believe that smaller and less well-documented cavalry charges likely occurred later on in World War II and possibly as late as the 1970s in Rhodesia, now Zimbabwe, they generally describe this as the last major charge in history. One of the last major cavalry charges in history took place during World War II. It is known as the Charge at Krojanty, which occurred on September 1, 1939, during the early stages of the German invasion of Poland. The Charge at Krojanty involved Polish cavalry against German armored units. The Polish forces, equipped with sabers and lancers, faced German infantry and tanks. Despite popular misconceptions that the Polish cavalry charged directly at the tanks, the reality is more nuanced. The Polish cavalry, the 18th Pomeranian Uhlans Regiment, did engage German infantry and cavalry in the village of Krojanty. However, they encountered unexpected German armored units. The Polish charge was largely successful against the infantry and cavalry but faced difficulties when confronted with the armored vehicles. While the Polish cavalry did not charge headlong into the tanks with lancers, they did engage in fierce combat. The cavalry managed to disrupt German infantry and cavalry formations but suffered heavy casualties when encountering the mechanized units. The charge at Krojanty became a symbol of courage and sacrifice, and it highlighted the challenges faced by traditional cavalry in the face of modern warfare with tanks and other armored vehicles. It's important to note that the use of cavalry in World War II was generally limited due to advancements in military technology, especially the widespread use of tanks and aircraft. After World War II, cavalry units became increasingly obsolete on the modern battlefield. The charge at Krojanty was part of the larger Battle of Tuchola Forest, which unfolded in the early days of World War II. As the German forces swiftly advanced through Poland, the Polish cavalry found themselves in a difficult situation. The 18th Pomeranian Uhlans Regiment, led by Colonel Kazimierz Mastalas, was ordered to delay the German advance and disrupt their communication and supply lines. While the charge at Krojanty is often remembered as a symbol of courage in the face of technological advancement, it's important to note that the details surrounding the event have been a subject of historical debate. Some accounts and popular perceptions have exaggerated certain aspects of the charge. The Polish cavalry at Krojanty did engage German forces, including infantry and cavalry, in fierce combat. They achieved some success against these traditional forces, showcasing the effectiveness of cavalry in the right circumstances. However, the encounter with German armored units, particularly tanks, proved to be a significant challenge. The myth that Polish cavalry charged directly at German tanks with lancers is not entirely accurate. The cavalry did charge into battle with traditional weapons, but when they encountered the German armored units, the situation became more complicated. The Polish soldiers attempted to engage the tanks in close combat, targeting vulnerable areas like vision slits and hatches. However, this was a highly perilous task, and the Polish cavalry suffered heavy casualties from machine gun fire and the superior firepower of the German mechanized units. The charge at Krojanty, while valiant, ultimately highlighted the limitations of traditional cavalry tactics against modern, mechanized warfare. The battle became emblematic of the broader challenges faced by the Polish military in resisting the German invasion, which included overwhelming air and artillery support for the Germans. The myth surrounding the charge has persisted partly due to Nazi propaganda that exaggerated the role of the cavalry to portray the Polish military as backward and ineffective. In reality, the Polish armed forces were not solely reliant on cavalry, they had infantry, artillery, and other units. The Poles faced a highly coordinated and technologically superior German military force, and their resistance, while ultimately unsuccessful, was marked by moments of significant bravery and determination. On the morning of September 1, 1939, the Pomeranian Uhlans encountered German infantry and cavalry near the village of Krojanty. The Polish cavalry, relying on their traditional weapons like sabers and lancers, engaged in fierce hand-to-hand combat with the German forces. They successfully repelled the infantry and cavalry, demonstrating the effectiveness of well-trained cavalry against infantry and other traditional forces. However, the unexpected arrival of German armored units, specifically the 20th Motorized Infantry Division, changed the dynamics of the battle. The Polish cavalry, despite their bravery and determination, faced the challenge of dealing with tanks and machine guns. The Uhlans were not equipped to handle modern armored warfare, and the charge turned into a desperate struggle against the overwhelming technological superiority of the German forces. The Pomeranian Uhlans suffered heavy casualties during the charge, and their actions were not enough to stop the German advance. The Battle of Tuchola Forest and the charge at Krojanty highlighted the stark contrast between traditional cavalry tactics and the mechanized warfare of the 20th century. The image of Polish cavalry charging German tanks became a widely propagated symbol, though the reality was more complex. Despite the ultimate failure of the Polish defense against the German invasion, the charge at Krojanty remains a testament to the bravery and dedication of the Polish soldiers who fought against overwhelming odds during the early days of World War II. In a closely packed formation, the Italian cavalrymen held themselves at the left flank and rear of the Soviet line, tossing hand grenades and slashing with their sabers. Despite heavy losses, they then passed through the line in a reverse direction and helped to dislodge the Soviets from their position. Other World War II cavalry charges had not been so lucky. At the beginning of the conflict, Polish lancers purportedly attacked a German infantry battalion, but not tanks, as Nazi propaganda would have us believe, and suffered predictably disastrous results. The final US charge took place in the Philippines in January 1942, when the pistol-wielding horsemen of the 26th Cavalry Regiment temporarily scattered the Japanese. Soon after, however, the starving US and Filipino soldiers were forced to eat their own horses. 2 months later, Japanese troops in Burma almost completely wiped out a charging Indian regiment under British command. In fact, rapid-fire weapons had essentially rendered cavalry charges obsolete over a century earlier. But old traditions die hard. For thousands of years, famed military leaders such as Alexander the Great, Hannibal, Genghis Khan and Frederick the Great had used mounted warriors with great effectiveness. Alex Bielikovsky, an associate professor at the U.S. Army Command and General Staff College, put it this way: if you see all of these guys charging at you, the human instinct for the overwhelming number of people is to run like heck. Then it's easy because once they're running away you can pick them off. Napoleon Bonaparte, who built up a potent cavalry force of his own, typically weakened the enemy lines with artillery fire and then sent in his cuirassiers for the decisive blow. The French cavalry under Napoleon were known to be the finest in the world, particularly in the way they handled large formations, said Jeffrey T. Fowler, an associate professor at the American Military University. They were very well trained to the point where they could stop, they were maneuverable, they could change direction, they could do all of these things. Nonetheless, even they suffered a disastrous defeat at Waterloo in 1815. Throughout the rest of the 19th and early 20th centuries, cavalry popped up as a major component of both guerrilla and anti-guerrilla operations. But never again would they shine in pitched battles. In the Crimean War, Russian artillery cut the British cavalry to pieces during the infamous Charge of the Light Brigade. Soon after, Union and Confederate commanders during the American Civil War learned it was suicidal to send their horsemen over open terrain against rifled muskets. As a result, they began saving their cavalry for reconnaissance purposes and long-distance raids behind enemy lines. While the charge at Krojanty is often discussed in the context of its symbolism and the clash between traditional cavalry and modern mechanized warfare, it's essential to understand the broader context of the German invasion of Poland in 1939. The invasion marked the beginning of World War II, as Germany, led by Adolf Hitler, sought to expand its territory and implement its aggressive geopolitical ambitions. Poland, caught between Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union, which invaded from the east as part of the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, faced a formidable challenge in defending against the coordinated attacks. The Polish military, though outnumbered and outgunned, put up a determined resistance. Beyond the famous cavalry charge at Krojanty, there were instances of effective defense against the German forces. For example, during the Battle of Wiesna, a small Polish force held off a vastly superior German army for several days, demonstrating strategic skill and bravery. The charge at Krojanty, despite its tragic outcome for the Polish cavalry, became a symbol of the broader Polish resistance. It illustrated the courage and dedication of the Polish soldiers facing a technologically superior enemy. The events of 1939, including the defense of Westerplatte and the Warsaw Uprising in 1944, contributed to the enduring narrative of Polish bravery and resilience during the war. More mass slaughters occurred during the Franco-Prussian War, including one in which throngs of dead French horsemen and horses thwarted a later attempt to march through the area. Afterward, the German Medical Corps determined that only 6 soldiers had died of saber wounds in all of the war's battles combined. Yet very few of these lessons sank in prior to World War I, in which armies on both sides showed up with lancers and swordsmen on horseback. "You're going against machine guns with a long stick," Bielikovsky said. "This is one of those examples of unwillingness to give something up just because we've always done it that way." During the first part of the war, cavalry played some role as the eyes and ears of the army. But at least on the Western Front, they were mowed down in droves every time they charged against positions fortified with barbed wire, trenches, automatic weapons and tanks. Perhaps because a few cavalry charges actually broke through on the less technologically advanced Eastern Front, armies remained loath to give up their horses. Cavalry even had its proponents in the United States, which was one of the first countries to fully mechanize. "The horse and mule are not museum pieces," Colonel John F. Wall wrote in a 1951 report now housed in the archives of the U.S. Cavalry Association. "If entirely discarded now, in days to come, they will reappear." It is indeed shameful that this day may be at such distance away that there won't be anyone available to pack a saddle or to throw a diamond hitch. In modern times, horse cavalry have been replaced by tanks for shock attacks, by armored vehicles and helicopters for transportation, and by aircraft for reconnaissance. But even with such modern weaponry available, a horse still comes in handy every now and then. In 2001, for example, US forces in Afghanistan were photographed riding steeds over rugged terrain alongside their Northern Alliance allies. Thanks for watching. Request you to subscribe the channel.